2 more minutes and then we'll start. Okay, I think we can get started. I'll start with a little introduction here. So we're going to obviously talk about Flutter, as you saw in the intro slide. Oh, thanks. So LinkedIn data says that Flutter is the #1 fastest growing skill among software engineers. It's one of the top 15 GitHub repositories, and it's used by millions of brands. I'm sure you'll recognize some of them when we show you later. Has anyone here actually heard of Flutter? Okay, there's one. Vaguely, okay. So it's actually for app development. I think you must have caught on to that in the last slide. And here are some of the greatest things about Flutter. It's fast, it's productive, and it's open, and it's beautiful, as you saw in the previous slide. So we'll get into some of these points in a bit more detail. When I say it's open, it's literally open and free. It's open source, and you can get packages over here at this link, pub.dev. And it's productive because you can change your code and you'll see it all happening in real time. So you don't have to waste time kind of writing code and seeing the changes afterwards. It all happens at the same time. Okay, and with that, I think I'll hand it over.
Okay, so just 1 second. Okay. Sorry about the little delay. Are you able to see my screen at the moment?
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So my slides, I'm going to be covering Dart and Flutter. So both Dart and Flutter work together to actually produce your application that will be your final result. So what is Flutter and what is Dart? So Flutter is a software development kit, and it contains a single code base to develop your cross-platform application. So what does a single code base actually refer to? So application, you might find that a lot of the times you're having to look up things like, how do I insert an icon? How do I? There's always different documentation that you have to read. But if you if you actually use Flutter in your development for your application, you'll find that everything is provided to you in Flutter itself. You don't need any additional code from external to actually achieve the same results as previously. Also, it's a cross-platform solution. So if you develop an application in Flutter, you can actually use it. You can develop simultaneously for both iOS as well as Android, for instance. So what does it actually mean for you in the long term? Actually, Flutter usage has gone up and shot up in terms of employment opportunities. So you can actually produce applications really fast and really quickly thanks to the hot reload feature that we will mention later on in the slides. So most importantly, I believe from my point of view and a lot of the research I've done, Flutter and Dart together worked to enhance the user experience and the user interface. So thanks to Flutter and Dart, you can actually customize your applications the way you actually want to, and it's actually very, very flexible in the way it does that. So where does Dart actually come into this? So Flutter is basically just a library or a framework of code that's written in Dart. And Dart is a programming language that's used by Google. And it's very similar to programming languages like C++. And yes, so generally, if you want to use Flutter, you have to have an understanding of Dart, but it's fairly easy to pick up from if you have some programming experience. We'll mention this a bit later on about the widgets, so I'll move on to the next slides and I'll hand it over to...
Yeah. Okay. Can you see the slide?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Okay, so we mentioned that Flutter is a UI framework that is used within Dart, but what is actually Dart? Dart is a programming language developed by Google used to build mobile, desktop, server, and web applications. So Dart has a C-like syntax. So to those of you who already know C, C++, or Java, it might feel somewhat similar. It is object-oriented language. So basically, each class you create will serve as a blueprint for all of the instances of the object that you create in the main class. It is class-based, so that means that each object you create will have a state, so some data and attributes. It will have a behavior, so certain methods and procedures, and it will have a identity, which means that each instance will be unique to itself. Also, since it's class-based, you can take advantage of other OOP concepts such as inheritance, polymorphism, or encapsulation. Finally, it is also garbage collected, which means that it has automatic memory management system service that basically automatically frees up memory that is being used by objects that are no longer in use. Okay, so this is what a basic Dart program looks like. It's very similar to a Java or a JavaScript program. So when you define a function, first of all, you would need to declare its return type. So in this case, it's void, but it could be integer, it could be string, it could be another object, for example. This is followed by the name of the function, in this case, print integer, and by the parameters. In our case, it's an integer called a number. And then similar to, for example, Java, you just print a certain string. And here the $sign is an identifier, so it just refers to the parameter you're calling, so a number, and you print it. In the main class, same thing. It's a void main. You create a new variable called number, and you just initialize it to 42, and then you call the function before, so print integer, and you pass to it the variable number, and it will just print this number. So as you can see, it's a very simple language to learn and to master. So now let's talk about like why should you use Flutter instead of other alternatives such as React Native or Xamarin. First of all, with Flutter, you get the same UI on multiple platforms. So for example, let's say you wanted to make or to create and deploy an application on both iOS and Android. Normally, you would need to write code for the two different platforms twice. So you'd need to write some code for Android and some code for iOS. With Flutter, you can just write it once, and the engine will automatically render it for all the supported platforms. So that means that normally the time that will take you to create and deploy the app on both stores, both the App Store and the Play Store, would be considerably less than normal native apps. Second, Flutter. Another reason to use Flutter is the reduced code development time. Flutter offers a hot reload functionality that basically lets you code almost in real time. Normally, when you change something in your code, it will take around 40 seconds to compile it and see the changes on your emulator. With Flutter, you can that time is reduced to almost nothing. So whichever change you make, you can see it reflected into your emulator almost instantaneously. Next, the Flutter apps have a performance almost as fast as a native app, thanks to the work of Google developers on the Skia engine, which they optimize almost every month. So you can get updates, and they're all automatically updated in your coding environment. And also the Google the Android developers community in general contributes to the ever-increasing number of widget templates, which you can find at gallery.flutter.dev. And on this website you can find thousands and thousands of templates that you can use free of use without any problem. Another big reason to use Flutter is that it is deeply integrated with other Google services. One such service is Firebase. Okay, so Firebase, as you may know, as you may have learned in the workshop a couple of weeks ago, it's a set of backend tools provided by Google that can help with the implementation of certain functionalities, such as authentication, analytics, push notifications, real-time database, and cloud storage. Okay, so how would you do it? You would need to install Flutterfire. Flutterfire is a set of Flutter plugins that connect the Flutter application to Firebase. So how would you install it? You would have to add the Flutterfire plugin into the dependencies section in the pubspec file, which is one of the main files in your Flutter project. Once you do this, you can use whichever Firebase service you need in your application. For example, just to make it easier to understand how we could make use of these tools, let's just say that we were to make a new QM+ application for students. You could use the Firebase authentication plugin to let our users sign in and out with their credentials. So, for example, the student ID and passwords. For new users, so users who do not have an account, you could provide them with the opportunity to register with their email and password. And there's also an email link authentication service. So, for example, you could ask them to check their email and click into the link that you sent that has been sent to them automatically to actually verify that they wanted to register. Another plugin that we can use is the Firebase Analytics plugin. We can use this to track the app usage and the user engagement. For example, we could track how many clicks a certain section gets, or how many what services are the most used, or similar stuff. In the QM+ example, for example, we could check how many clicks a certain section gets, or for example, how many people use the timetable service or the room booking system. Also, the push notification. So Firebase offers a Firebase messaging service that will let us push notifications into our users' devices. So there's two types of notification: the foreground notifications and the background notifications. The foreground notifications are notifications that are basically in-app. So you get this notification when the app is actually open and active. Whereas the background notifications are notifications that you get when the app is closed or in the background. Referring to our QM+ examples, we could use, for example, foreground messages to notify a user when, for example, somebody posts something on a forum. So you could get a notification when that happens. Or you could use background notification, for example, to push out a reminder that there is a deadline for a certain module for the day after. Also, Firebase messaging offers a subscription to topics service. So how would that work? So basically, let's say you are a first-year student. Obviously, you wouldn't want target modules notifications to come to you, right? So we could allow our users to actually choose the topics or modules that they want to be subscribed to and receive notification for, and that would obviously be more beneficial to the students, as they would not be cluttered with unnecessary notifications. Also, there's a real-time database service. So for example, let's say we were to store the personal information for all of our users. We could use the provided NoSQL database to store all of their personal data. And that data would be available in real time. So for example, even if you make a change, it will be available as soon as you push the change to all of your users. Also, Google provides data security for it. So that would make you could make sure that only the right people can access their information. For example, you wouldn't want somebody else to be able to access your own personal data. So you could restrict access to only a certain number of people. Finally, there's also a cloud storage option and the Firebase using the Firebase storage plugin. So this will let you store and serve user-generated content such as photos and videos and PDF and etc. Any kind of files. In our QM+ example, for example, we could store the submission documents, so for example, PDFs or code or zip files into the storage and be able to access them later separately. Okay, now let's take a look at some applications that were built using Flutter. First off, here you can find some famous, relatively famous e-commerce companies that decided to use Flutter to build their applications. eBay, which I think most of you will know, has more than 100 million users worldwide. And Groupon, which is a relatively popular application here in the UK. Both of them have recently moved to Flutter. Another one is the Philips Hue app. Philips Hue is a home ecosystem management app that lets you control your Philips Hue lights, which, by the way, are an example of IoT device. And there's the Stadia app. Stadia is a cloud gaming service offered by Google that lets you game on basically your browser, and that means that you don't need to have a powerful computer to game on. Next, the Google Assistant app. Google Assistant is one of the most popular Android apps. It has been downloaded more than 200 million times from the Play Store. And recently, the Google Assistant apps on all platforms were rebuilt using Flutter. So that applies to the iOS app, the Android app, and even the app for smart displays such as the Google Nest app, which is now also fully it was built using Flutter. Another last example is the New York Times app, which is used by around 45 million people daily in the US alone, and they recently rebuilt it using Flutter. Okay, now Vaki-san will talk you through the steps necessary to build your first Flutter app.
Okay, so hi. So simply put, to get started with Flutter, the best and easiest way to get started is with Android Studio. But I'll be going through more in a moment. So the first thing you want to ask yourself before you get started is like what device will you actually be developing for? So this actually encompasses all the ecosystems, all the devices that you're going to be targeting, and what devices you actually have available with you as well. So if you're developing an Android application, you can do that on all platforms. However, if you're developing an application for, let's say, an Apple device, you also need to have an Apple device of your own to test it out, as well as getting it onto the Play Store. So you do need to pick a device that will work to produce an application for the targeted device as well. So some of the things, so once you've decided with what you have available with you, you can then think about the software. So software-wise, I recommend two of them, Visual Studio Code or Android Studio. But for complete beginners, I would say Android Studio is the best option, purely because it does everything. It sets up Flutter and Dart for you without having to do it yourself. With Visual Studio Code, there is an advantage to using Visual Studio Code in some ways. If, for example, your system is quite laggy or your performance is not up to scratch, I would say Visual Studio Code is a lightweight option for testing out your Android applications or iOS applications that you'll develop with. So Flutter runs in both, in all of them. Finally, the last thing you want to consider is how will you visualize your creation. So it means that you do need to install emulators. So emulators are programs that will replicate a mobile phone on your screen. So you can actually test your what you've created immediately. One benefit of Flutter with visualizing your creation, thanks to hot reload, which is a feature that takes less than half a second less than half a second to refresh your applications when you make a change. So having this feature is really good for developing your applications because you don't have to wait. You can see any changes immediately. So again, I'm reiterating that Android Studio is the best and easiest way. So now we're just going to go through some slides that will cover how you actually set up your projects. So when you've installed Android Studio, you'll see a pop-up screen like the following on the right-hand side, and you'll see the first option is to create a new project. But usually, the second option that is beneath it, you wouldn't have it if you haven't previously installed Flutter. So this is your end result, in other words. So to get that option, you need to go to Configure, then click on Plugins, and suddenly you'll get a pop-up screen on Android Studio. And you can, in that pop-up, in the search box, you can just type in Flutter and Flutter will come up and you just have to install it. And likewise, I recommend you to also do the same with Dart because both work together and you can't really do much with only one. So once you've now you should have the option to create a new Flutter project. And once you've clicked on that, you should then follow and click on Flutter application. This will basically just present you with a really complicated screen, perhaps for if you don't have any programming experience. But if like me, I actually didn't know any programming a year ago, and I find it fairly easy to understand actually now. So if you really stick with programming and learning everything, you can find this something that's quite easy as well. So now we're going to be covering how does the code actually look like, and subsequently we'll be covering some actual real example that our team has built. So now I'll hand over to my colleague.
The slides up again. Here we are. Okay. So before we throw you into the deep end, you'll probably see a lot of code later on in this presentation. So I'm going to help you break down how it actually looks and what it all means. So this is more or less what you'll be seeing throughout most of today's presentation. So the code on the left creates the app on the right. There's not a whole lot going on there. All we've created is an app bar. I think you can see my cursor and the title. So the way Flutter works is it uses widgets. And as you can see here, all the things highlighted in red are widgets. So widgets are the components, such as the text and the app bar, that make up an app. And this is the basic layout of a widget. Every single widget follows the exact same structure. You have the widget itself, then you have the property and the value. And properties basically just customize your widget. So it could be anything from fonts, colors, sizes, everything. There's so much more that you can see in the link that we showed earlier on with all the packages as well. Yep, so if I just go back here to the same code that I just showed you, a bit more broken down so you can see that it is in fact following the same structure. So we're looking at the MaterialApp widget. Its property is home and the value is scaffold. And you might be thinking, but scaffold is a widget. That's true, and widgets can be values. Oh, got some message in the chat. Okay, great. No questions there, great. Yep, so we've got widget, property, and value. So what this is showing you is that you can just keep nesting widgets within widgets within widgets, and that kind of creates a framework for your code. So to the scaffold, we've added an AppBar property and another widget as the value of that property. And finally, the title widget. And the AppBar's properties are title, which is the widget, and center, because we want that to look nice and be in the middle, right? Yep, so hopefully that makes sense. If there's any questions, feel free to mention in the chat if we're going a bit too fast. Yep, so this is just a refresher to show you what we've created here. So the scaffold is the basic layout of the app. The app bar creates the bar at the top, and within that we've got the text. All on the same page, right? Okay, so having that been broken down for you, could you guys in the chat point out some of the widgets that you see in this code? Let's see who's awake.
Yeah,
Icon?
yeah, icon's a good one, yeah.
The yellow ones, that's true. You expose us. Okay, great. Yep, you guys got it. So these are the widgets that we've got here. Excellent. And now, similarly, could you guys point out the properties of those widgets? This one's a little bit more tricky because some of these, I think there's a bit of a blur between what's a property and what's a widget. Yep, Carla, that's correct. Center title, I think so. Yep, that's correct. Child label, good stuff, guys. Yep. So these are the properties. So some of the ones that are way out here that are not as indented are actually still properties. If you just follow the line up, you see what widget it belongs to. Another way we can represent this when we are planning the design of our app is through a widget tree. So this is exactly the same app following exactly the same code that we've just looked at, but it's split into a sort of more visual way rather than just a bunch of text that can get a bit confusing. So we can see we've got the app bar at the very top, followed by the body in the middle here. Then we've got the action button at the bottom. And as for this button in the middle, it's actually a child of the body widget. Excellent. I'll hand that over now.
Cool. Thank you. Just 1 second. So then, oops, I need to scroll through that. Okay. So thank you for that. So demonstration-wise, we've actually removed a lot of the basic code that you get immediately when you start a new project. So this is following from the creating a new project as before. So I've removed a lot of comments. There was a lot of comments in the original. You can have a read through. When you create your own project, you can have a proper read, and you'll see, and you'll actually come across a lot of new features as well that you might have not thought of. So now we're just going to be covering like what some example of projects that we've as a team have been making and demonstrating. We'll be demonstrating them. So we should have like a screenshot of all of our products that we've made and each incremental updates that we've done. So as you can see, there's lots of comment on that screenshot. But all of our code, by the way, is available on GitHub. So if any of you have access to it, feel free to download the source code and play around with change any features if you wish. So now, just really quickly, I'm going to cover how you get the emulator to get started. So I've highlighted on the top of the screen on the screenshot that you have. It's displaying no devices at the moment. But once you click on that box, it will give you an option to pick which ones. Now, the thing is, if you haven't installed an emulator before, you're going to have to do it first. And in the case of iOS, you have an option to do that as well. So now the code that immediately when you start a new project, you'll have a project file given to you by Google, and they've developed it. And if you just press run, which is the play button on the top bar of your window, that will immediately create an application that you can test in your emulator. And the application itself is just a simple counter. It starts off on 0. And as you can see on the right-hand side, if you press the plus button, it should increment the number as many times as you press it. You will also note that there's a debug on the top of the phone on the top left, top right corner, sorry. That's because it's not in release mode. So once you've released the application to your to the Play Store or the Apple Store, it will have to be removed. So you'd have to actually compile it, and actually your code will look a lot snappier and a lot faster. So now what I'm going to do, compared to the previous slide, I'm literally just going to take away everything and start from scratch. So in this slide, I'm just demonstrating that our application is running in the main method, and main is where every single Flutter application that you develop will run from. In the brackets run app, I've put app. That's just to signify an application. I actually haven't named it an app, so it's just an example. So in the next slide, what we're going to be covering is what is that app that's inside the stuff inside the bracket of run app. That's what we're going to define now. So in this slide, simply every tutorial obviously has hello world in it, and I thought, just give it a shot as well, and using the same information as normal. So as we mentioned before, MaterialApp is basically the parent container. So it's where your entire application will run. So everything that you fit into your application will be a child of MaterialApp. In this case, the text widget is simply being given to the MaterialApp, and that ends up being displayed on the top corner, top of the phone. A lot of the layout is something that you do have to consider when you create your application, right? So because user interfaces and user experience really matters. So you need to really think about how you're going to lay out. And there's two main types of widgets in Flutter that you might, in my opinion anyway. The first one is visual widgets, so widgets that display and give aesthetic properties that users might want. Another one is the layout, and the layout is something that just arranges them in a specific way that you desire. So a scaffold widget is going to contain. So what I'm doing here is creating I've changed from the previous code. I've added an AppBar this time, and it actually has nothing in it. That's because I haven't passed any information into the AppBar widget itself. I decided I also wanted a body to display some text. The text is always going to be on the left-hand side because I'm not aligning it in any way. So this is the first stage of our application. Then we've decided now to spice it up a little bit. So by adding some colors, I'm using background color to give it a blue-gray color, as it says on the screen. Now, there is a little bracket, and that bracket is actually optional. You don't need to do it. The square brackets. You can specify a number between 0 to, I think, 900. I thought, let's just go with the highest number. And so that number just signifies a shade, so how dark you want it, I think. Previously, the title should have been on the left-hand side if I didn't give it a center widget. So the center widget is actually an example of a layout widget, and it contains a text widget. That's the reason why it's in the center. There's many ways of actually laying out your project. So this is just one ways in which I thought about. So next ones, I thought, let's like Instagram, Facebook, have like a bottom navigation bar kind of thing, other than the operating systems one itself. So I thought I'd just create like a row of widgets, and those widgets, as you might guess, are icon widgets. I thought I'll just put a favorite. So actually, even if you look at the names of the icons, see the heart is called icon.favorite. The other one is audio track, airplane mode, that kind of stuff. So it's really, really simple. It's simple words that you can automatically pick as you code. Like, I didn't decide to choose these. It just happened because it came up on the options. So as you can see, you don't actually need to import anything from anywhere, and it's all part of Flutter. It's given to you, and you can customize them in any way you like. You can change the size, you can change the meaning of it. Yeah, and also on the code editor, you can even like see, I didn't notice this when I was making it, but afterwards I noticed you can see like the icons themselves on the editor before you even get to see it on your app. So this is just more things about the center widget. This time I've just decided to place the text in the center of the app. And yeah, so there's nothing much more to it, except I've kind of changed a lot of things on the code side. It still looks the same. So another thing from Aaron, you can also, so in programming, there's a concept of creating array lists and arrays, which I'm actually being introduced to in second year, to be honest. You can use that in your projects as well. The thing is, with widgets, they can have either a child or children. But if you choose to pass it children, you need to use some kind of widget, array list of widgets. And that can be done using row, for instance, or column. So row will display, for instance, my icons on the bottom are displaying in a row. So that's because they're contained in a row widget. The text itself is being displayed in a column fashion. That's because it's supposed to be a column. I'm not sure if I have it on there as well. So now I thought, let's change up a little bit more, because obviously images add a lot more to the user experience. So just for fun, I thought it'd be a good idea. So in the navigation part, you can see that I've added the logo this time, and it's really, really simple. You just have to use a row widget and pass it a list of the things that you want to give it. And then you can display both the way you want. That's really it. Now the image, so both image, the Flutter logo and the image themselves actually aren't from any resources on my computer itself. It's actually from the internet, and I'm using an image.network widget. And it's really that simple. You don't even have to worry about it at all. You just need the link of the image, and that's it. That's all you have to do, and just specify it in your code. So now we've just created an app, but so far our application has been really static, much like a really static web page that does not do anything. It was not changing in any way. The thing is, when you want things to start changing, you have to consider whether things have a state or whether they don't have a state. For example, in our application here, the AppBar does not change, so we don't really need to think about whether it has to change a state at all. So we can use something called a stateless widget. A stateless widget is basically one that does not change. It stays constant, basically. So anything that you want to reuse, if you want to reuse code, you can use classes, and that's where stateless widgets will be quite especially useful. So if you don't want to rewrite everything again and again, you can just use that. However, as you can see in our example here, there's a endlessly scrolling, an infinite almost list of new words that keep popping up, and this is not actually being coded, and it's being coded, but it's only about what, 10 lines, I'd say 10 lines of code that actually enables us to do this. In fact, To do this, you need to use a state widget, because we need to remember what the words are. So you need to use a stateful widget. And actually, where are we getting these words? So that's another good point to mention, I think. So these words are being given to us through a library that Flutter has. Flutter, if you go on the website for Flutter, you can see various different libraries that you can that have been pre-made, and you can get the data from those APIs and display it in your application. And it's a lot of time. Most of them are very open source as well, so it's quite accessible. So now we thought, because we've covered Google Cloud in previous events, I thought we'll try and together as a team work on a Google Map project. It's a very simple one. It's not complicated at all. It's simply just display. It's going to display a map in an application. So every project that you create in a Flutter or on in any coding environment will have a following file: pubspec.yaml file, and this is where you list all your dependencies. So what does your project actually depend on? In my case, I'm importing Google Maps Flutter, and that's a version number next to it. So subsequently, once you've added this to your pubspec file, Android Studio should automatically it will ask you, do you want to get the dependencies or you want to upgrade them? If you have never done it before, I would go with get dependencies, and it would load everything and prepare it all for you. So the file tree, you can see it on the side of on the left-hand side of Android Studio. This is where you'll also see the Android manifest file. So because Google Maps requires an API, so you need to have an API key. This is something that you have to do personally. It cannot be shared and actually cannot be exposed. So that's the reason why I haven't placed it here. But the key is freely available, and you do get some free credit given to you by Google. I think it's $300, I think, from when I tried. And the more API calls that you make, so the more requests to Google Map and Google Cloud you make, the more you end up paying. Yeah, and all of this requires a Google developer account. Now, you might also be worried about like how you control the costs. To do that, you can control how much money you spend, or restrict. Basically, you can place constraint on your budget. So this is basically the code for running our application for a map, and it's working. That's all that matters, I guess. And in terms of code-wise, it only took us about 21 line to 36, I guess. So that's how many lines is needed just to have this going. Nothing more. Yeah, and what if? So now I'll pass on to my colleague.
Okay, let me just get that up again. Cool. So far we've seen apps that only have one screen and a few buttons on it. But what if we want to have some more pages? Because if you think about it, pretty much any app you use, social media, e-commerce, or anything, has icons that will take you to another page. So we'll take a look at this app that you can actually have a go at yourself later. But one way you can do this is similar to how a stack works. So I don't actually mean anything particularly fancy by that. If you just imagine a stack of papers, anything you put on top, in order to get anything out from underneath, you have to take the top off again. So I'll kind of show you what I mean by that with some screenshots. So let's say this is our app. On the left, you have the home page, and by clicking the top right icon, it takes you to questions page, right? And then clicking the back icon will take you back. So the way that kind of works here is when we open the app, we have just the one page that we normally have. And when we click the icon, that goes on top, right? And then if we want to go back to the home page, we have to remove it again. So we're back to the start, as you can see here in the screenshots. So it's quite a nice and simple way, and I do encourage you guys to have a go. So this startup name generator here is a code that will provide a link for a guide on how you can actually have a go yourself. For those who want to get started immediately, I'll post a link here in the chat, but we also intend to put the link in the recording description as well. So yeah, any questions before we call it a day? Oh, there's a question here. Wait, where did Vakisan go? He's a Google Maps guy. He can answer a question. So the question is, do you make an API call every time you use the Google component? Yeah, I didn't actually make that one myself. We'll just wait for him to load back in. He can probably answer.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, I missed.
Oh, we're having some connection issues, I think. Vakisan, do you think you can get the question? It's just there in the chat. Do you make an API call every time you use the Google component or load it?
I believe it makes, I'm not too sure actually. I didn't research enough to be able to answer this question, but I think it does make an API call every time the map is being loaded.
Okay, cool. I think that's it based on the activity. Great. Okay. Here are some of the links that you can access. Again, I'll post the hold on. I'll post this one in the chat for you, so that you can actually have a go straight away if you do want to. But for those of you who want to have a go later, the links will still be there in the video description. Great, thanks for coming, everyone. I think that's it for questions. Anyone have anything to add? Okay, cool. Cheers, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was really good. I really enjoyed that. And I saw the GitHub as well. That's really good work. You three can leave if you want. I'll wrap everything up.
All right, thanks.
Cheers, guys.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, guys.